Okay. So this one's gonna be a bit of a cold open because I've been really busy this month and I haven't had a chance to get back to Ogre Dungeon in like over like a week, I think. And so what I gotta do to finish this project is, and let me make sure I got going on. So I felt kind of bad last time. I didn't notice the chat because I didn't expect anybody really to watch until maybe after the thing was done. And so I was late to the chats. And so let me see if I can do this way. Somebody actually suggested this. This was a good idea. I got my phone set up here. And I'm going to see if I can. If I can just make sure I don't do myself twice here. I'm becoming my grandfather. Where's the button for this thing? The YouTube. Okay, there we go. Great idea. All right. So, what I've got to do to finish this project is I have done a lot of work already, and this is actually a good example of when like you kind of went past good enough, because the original idea was just to make just a classic roguelike, right? But then of course, like as I got excited learning new things, I was like, oh, and I could do this and I could do that. And so now I've kind of backed myself into a corner of like, you need to kind of like calm down with adding things to it and just, finish it. Like otherwise it's gonna sit in the state that I think a lot of like indie developers get stuck in this, where it's like you're almost done and then it just kind of peters out. Let me see if I get this set up here. So it would be a practice in discipline. Okay, so my last thing that I'll do will be to decide exactly what my graphics are going to look like. So I've got my factions set up, all interact with each other in a very simple way. We got our combat systems pretty straight. So this was like a test map where I kind of like just put everything together that I'm messing with. We got a food guy. We got a monk guy. We got an old man who'll give like random cursed items and stuff. This will be for unlocking like maybe like a wolf guy or something. So this is where I was kind of like trying to come up with more ways to just sort of broaden the mechanics that are in the game. And it can get real easy to get stuck in that. Because you're just adding stuff and doing stuff, and the more things that you add, the more you're tempted to then add more things like new mechanics and all this sort of stuff, and next thing you know, you've bloated your project to the point that you're never going to finish because you're always adding stuff. And so this is exactly the stage that this project wound up in. And so what I've got to do here is find out what I'm missing, right? From my, or to seal my core game loop back up. So what I did for the maps too here is I have a semi-randomization for most maps here. And what I had done initially was kind of be like, all right, well, I'll just make different maps for everything. But then I wanted to do like very much in the spirit of retro, right? As you go deeper into the dungeon, like colors change, like the walls change and stuff like that. So I wrote a script that'll just basically replace the tile sets depending on a switch when you move from maps. And that kind of takes care of that. But so the semi-randomization that we did here is, and I figured this out the hard way. I used to do this event by event. And then eventually I got wise and was like, all right, we'll do common events for everything. But you got to be careful with the RPG Maker engine because common events can bog you down really bad depending on how they work. Because every extra thing you add, like remember that JavaScript's the single thread language. You can only utilize one core. Nothing is ever truly in parallel. It's just running so fast that it seems like it's in parallel, and it might as well be, right? But the more stuff you add, you know, like we're talking milliseconds here, so sometimes even just adding another thing through a common event can actually sort of bog you down depending on what it's doing, especially like screen flashes and things like this, or running multiple common events that are parallel processes and things. So one of the ways that actually, I'll go ahead and say it here and point it out, one of the ways that I overcame that problem in the engine here before I learned how to like just rewrite a lot of the stuff was by taking advantage of small nuances, right? So every time you get an event, it's going to be like event 141, event 142, event 143. These can't, like I said, like these can't all run at the same time technically. So what's happening is faster than you can believe, it's going through event 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like milliseconds at a time, every frame, and running everything. And what that means is that there's a sequential operation to everything in the game, right? So this is more important than just the fact that it's your 141st event, or just the fact that it helps you find it or locate it or whatever your event name and stuff. This is the order in which they're going to fire off. And then when you get into things like how they fire off, like the trigger, right? Like action button, player touch, event touch, all this. Auto run and parallel are like your automatic ones, right? And the difference is, if you've used the engine before, auto run's going to basically pause the game until this event is done, right? And then the parallel's going to just run in parallel with everything. It's going to be running while other things are running. And so what you can do to basically offset the load of like a processing on a complex game in the RPG Maker engine is you can take advantage of the sequential operation, right? So what I do is any important events, I make sure they're always like the same number. Oh, well, that's for a different reason, but they'll usually be an earlier number, right? Because I want to make sure they fire off first no matter what, even if there's a bunch of parallel events going off. And the way that there's tons of like auto runs and parallels and stuff, and then of course you got to take into account that, you know, the player might be surrounded by monsters and everybody's got to take a turn and all this stuff, but you also want to lock the player in place, make sure they're not able to move while this is processing. So what you do is I went in here and I have kind of a little cycle that when everyone's just standing around, you're sitting here, right, on this page. And I can like trigger it by like touching it or like clicking on it, and then it'll run the code for that common event. If the player is moving, what happens is a switch is on while he's moving. And then this guy has a route. Now, this is where we get into timing, right? So this is also a more complex thing too. You can put script in the movement route, because you can only, man, this was a really interesting way to like push the engine through its editor, because what's happening with all these events here is it can only read these pages so fast, and then of course it's got to, if you've got parallel events, it can only do those so fast, and so there's this sequential order that everything goes in, right? But you can cheat it by going into the movement route, because the movement route is its own kind of thing. It's always like a parallel process to the event's activation, or just the event's existence at all. Like if it's there and it's active, the movement route is a separate execution from it. So that's why, like, even if you've got a message box open, like sometimes things will move around and stuff, or even if the game's paused or something like that. So any code that you can't fire off fast enough in here, you can put in here. And that's what I wound up doing for a lot of these. Because there's only, if we're talking like a roguelike game, right, where you move one tile at a time. So technically there's only enough time, the time it takes from the player to move to from one tile to another, every single thing on the map has to fire off within that time frame, right? Including if somebody like moves twice or something like this. And so it took a lot of time to figure out exactly the right timing, but I got in here through the editor and was able to get it so that there's this sort of little thing that goes on. So you're standing there, you're moving, it comes alive, and then I let the editor name, like, right there, that sequential order, This is the turn system basically for the game, is that everything goes in its turn, but it seems like they're all moving at once. And so they'll move with this, and this is a parallel process. So while in movement, all of the map activates and comes alive, and everything's a parallel process. But if you interact with it, right, if you click and interact with it, it's going to flip switch C and then basically generate an attack. And the way that attacking works, and likewise, it's going to, you know, bump you back, right, because you got that little roguelike bumping fighting. And then it's going to, while it's doing that, we switch it from a parallel process to an auto run, because remember, it's going to like pause the game, right? And so this pause of the game basically lets everything catch up within the time that this thing strikes an attack and you attack it, right? So you're basically giving the engine room to breathe by actually engaging it, right? So even though there's like combat and stuff going on, it lets everything else in the background catch up and breathe. And so it keeps things running smooth, even when there's a lot of stuff going on the screen. And that's just the death thing. If it dies, it runs that script. This is sort of a pause mechanism that, while casting a spell that selects a target. This is a, what is this? Oh, that's if they get hit by a projectile. And then this is, oh, and then these are different monsters. So this is the semi-randomization part, right? So depending on, like, you can do a lot with just the number 3, right? If you go by 3s, there's a lot of stuff that you can branch out with. So everything usually goes up to about a 3. You come into a thing, you're going to have a random variable that rolls 1 to 3. You're going to have a deep random variable that rolls 1 to 3. And then depending on the order of those, right, or the combination of them, different monsters will appear. This was my older spawning system, if you will. But it also keeps it so that I can control what kind of monsters are in there, right? And then some only appear if certain conditions. So, and then one of the bigger challenges of this one too was it is not native to the RPG Maker engine that events can interact with one another, like NPC interaction. And so I had to kind of write out some stuff. Let's see. I think it's all in common events now. I definitely see the appeal to like the base philosophy of object-oriented programming after working with this one. Definitely see the appeal by basically creating functions of everything within functions and all that kind of stuff so that you can just call even simple things easily. And you know exactly what it's going to do, you know where to go to fix it, and then you can just basically scale that, right? It's like, so now instead of having to, because man, it was a nightmare, I would have to change one monster, right? And then I'd have to copy and I'd have to go through every single map and copy and paste because I was trying to avoid using common events. But then I just, you know, kind of focused on performance and went back in, and now I only need to change one thing and it'll update all the monsters. So seemed like kind of a duh like moment, but now I understand exactly the process behind all that. Done that way. Sneaking, all this kind of stuff. So let's take a look. Here's my start location. Oh, and then also there's the procedural generator that will actually generate random dungeons here. Both of those. So I want to find I think I need to go to start here. Remember right? Alright, so very simple retro opening, right? Let me make sure my mic's not picking this up. Okay. Got some little placeholder artwork here. Because remember, we're going to have to come back through and replace all of this stuff here. Once we decide exactly what kind of retro flavor we're going with. So we've got, and this was the thing too, right? It's like, do you go with classes? Do you go with, fix that. You go to things. I'm experimenting with classes right now. So choose a few starting items here. It felt appropriate because the game's actually pretty challenging. And then, so the way the character traits work is, this is really what's going to control a lot of the difference. Because, like, even in Neverspring, I talked about trying to design games according to sort of, like, amplify player behavior. So this is going to do some stuff with that. Let's see. Alright, so that's why I took the time to go through all that stuff talking about the movement system and the combat and stuff. It's so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about here and sort of know what's going on in the background while I'm moving around doing stuff. Oh, that's a big mob. Uh-oh. Oh. Oh, alright. Not sure why I did that. Oh. Everywhere. A little food. Because before I went classes, I had like a paper doll system in here. Let's see if I can even bring it up. Yeah, so this was what you look like if you don't have a class. Like, and you just kind of go by like what you find in the dungeon. And so this stuff would, see, there's like a little paper doll system there. Eat that. Alright, so this tall grass hides things. That guy just stepped out of the tall grass. So I'm seeing a little bit of lag here. Aw. Gambled and lost. Yeah, that feels smoother. Maybe that one map was a little laggy here. Cave, I don't want to go in there. Like I said, the combat and stuff works pretty well. And so you have your hunger here, but if you use magic, basically kind of like your mana is your energy. Oh, I hit somebody. Some spells, you know, will use up a lot of energy and you'll have to decide. whether it's worth it to, you know, like if you got enough food or whatever. Oh, hey. I don't want it. Alright, so the ogre's coming for me. I'm gonna hide in this grass. You see me? No! So this was something I needed to fix, right? In my pathing system, like, I don't know if you saw that, but I tried to run out the door real quick, and I accidentally, like, kind of bounced off the wall. See, there we go. And what that is, that's kind of a user error thing, is I clicked the wall, I didn't actually click the thing. But in a situation like that, where I'm going to have to assume my player's going to kind of maybe freak out if they're actually trying to, like, stay alive. I gotta keep that kind of stuff in mind. See if the ogre will find me. Oh, there he is. I have to run through here. I'd have to find a way out before he catches me. Where are the stairs? I feel like I already went that way. Ah, see, I just did it again. Ah! Alright, I might have to cheat a little bit here. This is my wushu training. I'll try one more time, and if not, I'm gonna have to cheat here. Oh, I got a big old lag spike. What's up with that? I'll have to investigate. Let's see. I think if I switch to this one. If I go classic mode. Nope, I brought me that. Like I said, it's been quite a few days before I could. Okay, so this was like a. This was the second part of the game. Third part. get all that. So... Yeah, okay. Alright, so I'm starting to gain traction now. Alright, I see where I was. So, what I really need to decide next is whether it's going to be just a simple roguelike, or whether it's going to be closer to like a loot extractor roguelike. Because I've got both options already baked in here. And then also, so let's go ahead and... go ahead and get our thing here, right? So, loot extractor versus... call it. Versus traditional... Okay. What? Alright, whatever. Yeah, now it's bugging me. Oh, I hate you. What is wrong with this thing? Alright, you know what? That's gonna bug me. It's gonna bug me forever. Whatever. Come on. Oh, alright. Okay, yeah, so next was the entrance, right? So, this I got from, God, I used to play these really old D&D manuals, and I remember one of the big things of it was you didn't always enter the dungeon from the same place, right? Like you would in most games. Like, you think about, you're always, anytime you go in a dungeon, you always enter in the same place, and it's always the same run through, you know, even if it's like random. But, the idea is that these will be different ways to enter into the main dungeon. Right? You got your sewers, your main entrance, the old mithril mines, you know, the catacombs. And so, of course, by choosing which way you go in, they all lead to the same place in the end. But it's going to change how your playthrough goes, right? So we need to decide if we're going to actually do this. I do have maps for them, but it's going to be kind of part of our overall final structure here. So we talk about multiple entrances versus single entrance, I guess you'd say. Right? So, spellbook. Do some more work on the UI here. So this was more what it kind of was going for, more of like a kind of an older game UI setup, maybe like close to Ultima Online, if you ever played that. Permanent power-ups after you die. Interesting. Think how you might do that. Maybe if you like find certain things, like can play or go between runs and kind of power up your character. Oh, speaking of which, that's another thing that we had to decide, right? That was one of the first things we said. So classes versus kind of more of a build as you go. Generic adventurer kind of thing. And the other thing we had to decide too, now that I'm thinking about it, is the ogre itself. You know, now that I think about it, I feel like this is going to be the deciding factor between whether we go loot extractor or traditional roguelike. It's going to depend on how the ogre's behavior is. So ogre behavior, right? Like constant threat versus final chase. Because we got two ways that we can do it with what we've got so far, like coded into our project. Is you can either have the ogres constantly looking for you, right? And so every floor there's a chance that he's gonna just kind of appear and chase after you. Now, if you don't go loot extractor with that, I feel like what you're going to find is that the ogre catches people almost all the time, right? Because then the only way out is you're going to have to find the exit. And if you do something too, because right now his appearance in that situation is based on the amount of noise you've been making, which can build up pretty quickly, especially if you're fighting. And so, or if you're not paying attention and like breaking a bunch of barrels all at once. So, you know, there's a chance he could appear when you're pretty far from an entrance or, you know, to the next floor. And if you, but for like in the loot extractor mode, there are like ways to exit the dungeon rather than go deeper in. And you can even find stuff like little portal scrolls that where like no matter where you are in the dungeon, you know, if it's an emergency, you can just open a portal and leave if you've got an extra scroll. So in that instance, you know, if the ogre found you, if you had a portal scroll, you could be like, oh, I'm out of here, and just dip out. Or you could try to find one of the exits to the dungeon on top of finding, you know, a way down. So that I feel like in that regard you would have, or in that situation you would have a character who's maybe like, worst case scenario, you're like, do I leave the dungeon or do I go deeper, you know, to avoid this danger kind of thing. Because what I'm focusing on in the design here for the roguelike is I'm trying to take the player's behavior into account and let that steer a lot of what goes on in the game. And then I'm also trying to take into account giving the player chances to make decisions, right? Because from my study of like the original Rogue games, that's what like the gameplay loop's pretty straightforward, right? You just walk in, you fight monsters, you get out, and you find the treasure. But what makes the game so interesting is that your behavior changes a lot of the stuff, and that you have these moments where you have to make a choice, where it's like, do I, you know, get this or do I get that? Do I eat this food now or do I save it for later? The loot you find gold can use at end of run to get stronger. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. So I'm thinking then, do you like... Because if you went that way with it, you could kind of blend the loot extractor and traditional thing. You wouldn't have to choose one or the other. Because then, even if you die, maybe you can get some stuff out, or maybe you can spend your points, like your score points or something, or some gold you find, because there's all the treasure in the dungeon. And then maybe you can kind of build yourself up along the way. Okay. So there's my noise meter as I'm walking. If I make too much noise... Oh, look at that. And then I'm also keeping an eye out for things that I know I need to finish that maybe are unfinished here. This is one, actually, right? So let's go ahead and write this down. Here's what we'll do. We'll label these as such. One, we're going to need our UI overhaul. Two, what did I just say? Oh, yeah. Okay, so the procedural generation. Right, so right now it's a pretty simple script. It procedurally generates our dungeon layout, and then it will kind of decide where to put some stuff here. A couple of little, you know, decorations, what have you, treasures and the like. But my skills with procedural generation are still new and kind of coming up here. So my only concern with using the procedural generation is that our maps are going to be very obviously kind of elementarily procedurally generated. Like there's not a lot of advanced randomization going on here. And that's just a product of my own knowledge coming up, trying to figure things out here. But I feel like that we could lean into that with a design choice, right? Like, so if we really retro up this game, then you might actually expect to see something like this, right? So maybe we could lean into that. Because I'm kind of torn between the idea of... Uh-oh. Yeah, right? Like, that would be easy to do, too, because you could turn, like, the idea of sending stuff back. You could take the exits for the dungeon and just transform them into kind of things that send stuff back, right? Have my energy drink. I think the Ogre is still running on the old engine-based pathing on this map, so I don't have to worry about him, I don't think. He's going to get stuck on something, I'm sure. Yeah, I do like the idea of using procedurally generated, but yeah, it's definitely going to depend on the art style, because the main difference between the two, as far as using when we're talking about like the RPG Maker engine and my own skills with procedural generation, the main difference here, of course, is you're going to have a wider array of randomization, but the design, like the look of the dungeon, is what's really going to change. Because, like, maybe you can tell, but like this is more detailed. Like I have much more control over what I want the dungeon to look like, to sort of, you know, build this sense of whatever feeling I want to evoke in the player. Now, a lot of the stuff that I've done with Unity has kind of opened my eyes to some possibilities with the RPG Maker engine, right? So, a lot of dungeon randomization in Unity right now, from what I can tell, utilizes sort of like this bloom pattern of procedural generation, where there's like these layers to it, right? So one such like random, like a random dungeon generator that I've seen that's really cool is you actually have like these rooms, okay, that are already like, you know, they've already got furniture and stuff in them, you know, but you have all these rooms, and what it'll do is it'll procedurally generate like the hallways and the connections between the rooms. But then as it'll also, there'll be like a secondary thing where it randomly decides what rooms are going to be connected there. So your hallways always look different. Your rooms are always the same, right? There's like types of rooms that'll show up, but where they pop up, you never know, right? I think Dark and Darker does something like this. If you've ever played that game, because they'll always be you know, like, what is it, like in the little castle dungeon, there's like a library, there's an altar, there's a, you know, like you have these rooms, but they're not always in the same place, you know what I mean? Then you can go a little bit deeper with it, where you have a random procedural generation that generates your hallways and connections. Then it decides what rooms go in, and then you have a secondary procedural generation inside the rooms, that once the room is established, it then decides what's in the room. You see what I'm saying? So you kind of like sort of a ripple effect of little procedural generations here. Now, there's nothing stopping us from doing something like that in RPG Maker, because what I can do is, like, it's a little bit different, right? Because what I would have to leverage my knowledge and what I've learned so far in a way to mimic this effect, right? And so one thing I can do is I already have stuff in place here that can place tiles during runtime and decide like what, like, basically I have runtime access now to all of the stuff for mapping, right? Like if I want to like change the walls, remove a wall, change what the floors look like, or any of that kind of stuff, that can be done in runtime during gameplay, really simply. So what you could do is, like, the first thing that comes to mind is like, let's say I wanted this room, right? What we could do is let's generate a map. Shouldn't have gone away. I shouldn't have gone away. Which one was I on? There we go. So we say we want that room, right? Okay, so here's what our map looked like. So the way this procedural generation works is it's going to decide how many rooms you want, what like the leaf size is, all that kind of stuff, how far apart they should be and all this. And so each box is technically a room, right? So by knowing what the maximum size of your room is, you can see how far everything is apart from each other. And you're like, okay, so I would need like rooms like maybe this size kind of thing. So what you do is you take, you'd have to take like maybe like Notepad or something, kind of figure out what all this stuff is and have an event that basically kind of moves around like this, right? It'll start in the middle and it'll go boop, 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 and then it expands, right? And it just blooms out like this. And as it moves, it'll place tiles, right? So it's almost like a room bomb, right? You just drop it, and when it explodes, it moves around and writes out this room. And then what you could do is find where rooms are. Once the dungeon's randomly generated, blah, 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 procedurally generated, everything should be tagged as a room. So you find the rooms and then drop these little, like, spawn the events. And this will all happen like lightning fast, right? Like the player won't even notice. But it'll overwrite all of the mapping and all of the walkability and all that kind of stuff. And you're just going to want to make sure that your hallways line up. But then basically you can have rooms that sort of like, you drop your little room bomb events, they explode and write out a new room. And as far as the player knows, you've just had like a full random dungeon. And you can still control stuff like how it looks, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put that down as an idea because we're concentrating right now on finishing the project, right? We could always come back and put that into an update or something like that. But I like that idea, and it wouldn't be too hard to do. It would actually be pretty easy. It might be a little time consuming, but it would be cool. It would be cool. All right, man. Take it easy. A good day at work. I'll see you when you get back. Shoot me a text when you get off. Where were we? Doing something mightily important. There's one of our little strangers, right? And the closer I get, it'll reveal himself. Sometimes it's a monster. All this treasure ain't worth it if I starve. I'll trade anything for some food. There you go, pal. And then, of course, we've got that set up to affect later on when we do the other stuff in the game. How about I help that guy? A couple different things I was trying with, like whether it's like they should always be black background or not. That'll also depend on what our final art style looks like. I'm gonna do that with a room bomb. We've already got our monsters set up, right? The Ogre. Okay. It doesn't matter what their graphic is because that's all controlled on the map. Remember, in this project, all we're really doing here is utilizing the database for the most part. And then we're kind of using RPG Maker in a really weird way, which I'm sure that other people do this with other engines. I'm sure this is actually pretty normal in like if you're like a professional coder, professional game developer, app guy, whatever. But what I'm doing is I'm utilizing the database for my characters, my inventory, my items, all this kind of stuff. And then I am utilizing the event naming system and the editor's decision on how to trigger the events to basically exist as my turn-based system through timing here. Let's see, we got to decide loot extractor versus this. We got a couple extra ideas there. Multiple entrances versus single entrance. So that's going to require extra mapping, right? If we do that. But I really like that idea. And maybe that can be something that we add in later as like an update. Right? Because what we're trying to focus on again here is having our totally complete game loop done, ready to go. And then all the bells and whistles we can still attach at any time. Classes versus build as you go. Our ogre behavior. So when I was playing, right? When I did have the game loop sealed up and I was like playing and I was like, oh, maybe this game's ready to go. What I found was I couldn't tell if it was because I made the game and I'd been working on it or like, you know, too much or whatever, but I would have like, you know, some fun moments and stuff, but by far the most fun was the very end when you're running out being chased by the ogre. But I kept having these moments where I was just kind of like, it was real easy to put the game down, you know? But as soon as I added in the ogre chasing me, which was the original concept for the game, like the very original concept was just a labyrinth that you go into and eventually the Minotaur tries to come for you, and it was going to be like this loot extractor where you could leave the labyrinth and kind of sort through your stuff you found and then like prepare again and come back. So I tapped into that old code that I had in there and we changed it to where the ogre, if you make too much noise, will come after you. And just the feeling of like the whole feeling of the game changed. Like it felt much more urgent. It felt like it just felt cooler. It was more fun. I had to make more decisions because of my noise meter. So, you know what? Let's make this decision now. We're going to say constant threat. Because I think this is going to be kind of the core of a lot of our other decisions here. So our map process, right? And the reason why it's important to sit here and make these decisions now and then kind of lock in and, you know, adhere to them is that this is going to be where we're pouring our efforts into. Because if I decide to go full randomization, then I don't need to mess with these maps. I can just kind of abandon them if I want to, or just have them for later. Maybe use them for like my dungeon entrances later, whatever, and rely solely, because then I'm going to need to put all my energy into really working this procedural generation script into something that like can create whole dungeons rather than just shapes and then like randomly placed artifacts. And that'd be interesting. And the reason why I'm tempted to go into that too, right, is the same reason, because like my work with Unity is, that's kind of how a lot of games are made now. Is either they're full randomization with like some little techniques added in to make them like more alive, or I know, too busy having a chin wag. But I'm either gonna have to go full randomization, and you put in a little extra stuff, or they'll do the thing I was talking about where like your hallways and connections get randomized and that sort of thing. Or an overworld concept of that would be like maybe your forests appear in different places and the roads go in different directions, or, you know, entrances to different zones or whatever. And so I feel any work that I do on that for RPG Maker would translate well over to Unity and other game design, or any kind of app design that has to deal with procedural generation. You know, it's an opportunity to go ahead and start broadening my skills over like a in a way that affects like the overall thing, right? So I'm really tempted to do that. Plus, I feel like it's a good way to showcase that like the engine can do a lot more than people give it credit for, which I'm all about. So let's decide on, it was going to be semi-random versus procedural. And we're going to say procedural. Let's get crazy with it. Let's get in there. And as soon as we get the direction we want to go, we're going to fire off and see what we can do. So let's see. Classes versus build as you go. This one I'm still kind of on the fence about. Multiple entrances versus single entrance. So here's what we're going to do for this one. We're going to go ahead and decide. We're going to go ahead and say, especially since we're going to be doing our procedural generation, we're going to go single entrance. Because technically the entrance is going to be different every time because you're in procedural generation. Later, we'll come back. And do our multiple entrances. Now, another thing about the multiple entrances, though, is that if you don't go loot extractor when you start the game, here's kind of what I'm visualizing, right? You would pick your character, and then it would go directly to the screen for... not necessarily anything wrong with that. Right, so you would start your character, you would have your character sheet, you choose your traits and class or whatever, and then straight to that tiny little world map or a little thing where you choose an entrance and then you'd start the game, right? Now, if you went loot extractor, it adds an extra step. You're going to be in town. There's like that little tavern that you go to. And then when you go to leave the tavern, your little dude walks out and then the map will appear. Because this is going to affect the very beginning of the game too, right? If it's not a loot extractor, you're just going to go straight to the dungeon. If it is a loot extractor, it would probably be best to start the player in the tavern and let them choose when they're ready to start the dungeon. Now, from a game design aspect, I'd have to take a roguelike player's average behavior into consideration here. In a JRPG, you want to engage the player immediately because you're so story-driven. But in a roguelike, I feel like an average roguelike player is much more likely to be invested in preparation. They must be if they enjoy the roguelike, like the roguelike genre, right? And of course, I don't have time to go around and ask a bunch of them. So I'm going to have to make a decision on that on my own. Because we have to assume that anyone who tries the game out, right, when you look at the numbers, is you've got about 30 minutes max to get the player to decide they want to keep playing. Sometimes less. And so the very first open of the game, and again, I mean, this is my opinion, right? Just from looking at stuff and checking out the analytics on... Gosh, I think it goes beyond video games. There's a version of this for YouTube, too. It's like you've got 30 seconds or less for a person to decide whether or not they're going to watch, right? And the vast majority don't go past 30 seconds. So you've got this very small window of opportunity for the player to trust that they're going to have a good time or find something, you know what I mean? And so it's going to be an instant action versus preparation thing. When I think about it, like, so as I've played through the game in different ways, there is a problem that stood out to me, and it's that I feel like the town feels like an extra thing, like it's almost like a hiccup. You know, one way you can do with loot is have like death or pity stat. So it's like an unseen luck stat The more you die, if you don't get far, you can find better chest or loot. So let's see here. What else do we still need to decide on? Classes versus build as you go. Loot extractor versus traditional. What if rather than the town, you had like maybe a loot screen, like a different scene? Let's see. See how this fits there, because I think I've got a little loot extractor spot right here. This would of course be a different kind of UI. And so since this was originally going to be kind of like a game that should be able to be on PC and cell phone, I had like a very small little tavern that was just more of like a back screen than anything. An old character selection. There's something about that transition that feels a little weird. Like, it doesn't feel quite as smooth as I'd like it to when you have the town like that. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, when we checked this out earlier at the very beginning, I think it did go that way that we were talking, right? So you character screen, then map. No, okay, it sends you directly there. So let's see what that would look like real quick. Goodbye. Ah. Oh, no, just kidding. Where'd it go? Ah. Aha. Quite. I think I want to skip here, right? Maybe I could combine the concept of the tavern in this map and have some stuff like on the outskirts, on the sides of the thing. Possibly. That feels a lot smoother. I like that better. So if we went extractor with that, then you would return to that map, I guess? Or would you still return to a third scene? Let's see what that feels like. Oops. That feels interesting. Like, that's kind of got my gears turning in my head about the whole multiple entrance thing. Because if you can do that, what's to stop you from choosing to go to different parts of the inside of the dungeon, right? Like maybe you find a hallway that can travel to some part of a dungeon, or maybe you find like an old lift, like kind of like a little old service elevator or something that can travel, and like, you know, basically it lets you travel to whatever part of the dungeon that you want or something. Possibly. I do kind of like how that feels a lot better there than going all the way back to town. Oh, you know what? That actually feels okay. Like being able to choose to go back to town or go to a different dungeon. It doesn't feel quite as like jarring as oh, that's right. So there was one other thing I was thinking about doing. Is maybe like having like sort of a middle ground. Right, so if we go with that idea that we add stuff to this screen, right? Like some sort of interactive stuff, or maybe I can like pull up my thing, because I can access my items here. maybe I can do some extra stuff here so that I don't have to go all the way back to town if I don't want to. Because what I was thinking about doing is I have a map that can procedurally generate like these forest environments and stuff like this as well. And so I did consider the concept of having it where you need to actually journey to the dungeon if you're all the way back in town, right? You got to go through this forest and stuff to get to one of these, but that might be too much. And so the choice, and that if you do that though, the choice that you present the player with, I'm thinking, is do they want to go all the way back to town? Or do they want to just go to, like, you know, basically get away from the ogre, or kind of be safe for a minute so they can mess with some stuff here on the map, right? Like maybe go through like their little box or whatever. But then if you do that, you have to consider what the differences would be between the two. If you're going to basically kind of quote-unquote punish the player by having to go all the way back to town, then there should be something in the town that they can't get otherwise that's important. That would be worth sacrificing the time or the possible danger of having to go back through the forest to get to the entrances. And of course, my first instinct is some sort of banking system, right? Where you can store stuff. But then, if you have to do that all the way at town, then, you know, why would I... Whoops. Ooh, unlocking the other entrances. That could be a good idea. Or can bring you to harder parts of the dungeon so you don't have to start at the beginning all the time. You need to unlock the other entrances. Okay, so let's see. So let me kind of write out this concept here. So, if you have unlockable entrances, and you're talking about going deeper into the dungeon too, right? So you would have like maybe surface level entrances, maybe mid-level entrances, and then like deep entrances. And then, so you need to unlock the other entrances, right? So your surface level entrances would be available immediately, right? Or at least one of them would be. So this would be like sewers, main, mines, catacombs, right? The ones that we've got there. And then maybe your mid-level entrances would be like... I don't know, just for the sake of like kind of brainstorming, we'll say like balcony, roof, maybe like window, I don't know, you know. And then your deep entrances would be like something like maybe, you know, tower, if you're going up anyways, right? But actually, if we take a page from like the Dark and Darker thing, maybe you go like deep instead of up. So maybe like, you know, once you're in there, right? Like maybe there's a barracks, maybe there's like a reliquary, etc. Right, so there's like the outer parts of the dungeon that lead deeper in, and then like once you're in the dungeon, there's these sort of checkpoint entrances, and then once you go real deep, maybe you get to like the there's like the dungeon prison, Right, maybe like the... like a ruined cathedral or something inside there. Some of these effects. And then so maybe you have only the main entrance initially, and then you unlock like sewers, mines, or you can unlock sewer, mines, catacombs. But then if you get deeper, you can unlock like, you know, barracks, reliquary, great hall. And then even deeper, you could unlock something like dungeon prisons and ruined cathedral. And so each time you leave, you don't have to go from the beginning again. You can kind of, you know, reclaim these checkpoints, so to speak. Interesting. All right, let's keep that there. We're gonna. I feel like I like the bump fighting best. But then I gotta go back and redo my camera, otherwise this is gonna make people dizzy. Okay, yeah, and then so you would have... So I'm just imagining if I had to, like, run from the ogre, and I came out here, I might be like, man, I had to sacrifice my progress, but at least I'll be stronger when I go in, kind of thing. But if I've gotten deeper and I've unlocked those other entrances, then maybe it's not as big of a deal, kind of thing. Okay. Alright, so I guess that's going to push us closer to our loot extractor idea, right? Okay, I'm trying to think. Let me sit here for a second. I gotta think, make sure there's nothing else that I need to decide on. Classes versus build as you go. Loot extractor, single entrance, constant procedural. Then what? I'm actually, I'm liking how this is coming out though, because this is a lot closer to the original concept that I had when I first started this project. We got the loot extractor, we got the chase, the constant threat. I like adding the entrance ideas, and I like doing the procedural thing to push the engine and kind of show it can do, you know, you do a little more than people think it can. And let's say, then we'll be sealing up the game loop. Got artifacts, fighting, we've got stuff you can get, treasures, all that stuff already done. Switch mechanics. We did need to, we can do that. At some point we're gonna have to, I need to add more or better traps to the dungeons. I do need to do that. Let's add that to what needs to be finished, right? Trap redesigns. And because right now as I play through, it feels very combat heavy. Like, you're mostly beating your way through monsters. And I wanted to try to boost as much, like, environmental interaction as I could, right? We're going to want to do that trap redesign. And then, so if we're going to rely on procedural generation, I don't really need to worry about that too much. We can go into this part here. Okay. So, all right. So our design's going to be this then. We're going to come back to this one and ask it because that's not really too bad for like the structure of closing up our loop here. We're going to constant thread okay. So we've got all of our dungeon. We have a kind of separate script here that controls what the floors are and triggers when you go to Thingamabobber. Going to be the final part here where you got to leave the dungeon, right? Quick. There we are. Our final. Oh, all right then. Let's try that again. Jeez. Talk about wrong place, wrong time. This works. We're going to start bringing this puppy together here. Yeah. You journey home to sell your pilfered loot for a glistening mountain of gold. Yay, woo! Adventures the world over. Speak of your deeds and call you Manslayer the Conqueror. Then we gotta attach this to the Steam API once we got everything set up here. Get a little high scores. That's the end. Alright, let's get to work. So, need to set up our good to go. So we're gonna need to set up our dungeon entrances, or our escape entrances, I should say. So we're gonna need to add escapes to the map. Let's do that right now. I've got a sort of template that I made here. The crypt. There it is. Alright. So need to do it like alright, so we're gonna need this to go up against a wall. Alright, so we're gonna have this on the top tile. But next, technically it needs to be right on the wall. So what we're gonna have to do is do a custom route. No, we don't want it copying the position of the player. That's an old skip if can't move. Do not repeat movements. We just need it to move up one because we're going to want it right on the wall. So it's going to need to do this basically. It's going to need to through on, move up, through off. Make sure it fires off fast enough. We want highest frequency, highest speed. The player won't see it. It'll be gone somewhere. Make sure it does what it's supposed to do. We also need... Is this the... Not the right... Because by default, the RPG Maker engine does not process event movements that are beyond the player's sight. But since we're talking about like procedurally generating a dungeon, and we need things to fire off way beyond the player's sight, we need to make sure that that is taken care of. Oh, maybe that is. Maybe that is it. Okay. Where's the ogre? Oh, okay. I wasn't all the way over. Alright. So, this is going to control where it spawns here. We got top, left, top, right. We want to make sure at least one comes in here. So we need a minimum of one. Let's say, for testing purposes, let's add 3 of them. No, let's add 5. Maximum. One rate, make sure that it... If there was only one, I'd want to change that rate to 100. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to that. It's probably going to give me 5 every time. I don't think I need this page. Okay. And we want to do what I was talking about here. Now we can take this. What I also do too is I use the notes a lot, right? Your event notes. Because you can examine what's in them and you can change what's in them during runtime. So you could even technically like write your own little like monster database and have all their HP and everything in here, right? You could do something like HP 3, right? They'll always start with 3 HP. And then when you attack them, it reads the note and changes it to 2 or 1 or 0. And then if it's 0, you could kill them kind of thing. We're going to say exit. Okay. So if we did that correctly, be about... Oh. Might help if I was actually playing on the map, huh? Let's see if we can find one. Okay, I did put tags on them on the map so that I could see where they are. So let's go check them out. There we go. Yep, see, look at that. They moved up onto the thing like they're supposed to. Okay, we're connected to our new map thing here. And we also need the other part of that event here to create the illusion of a rope hanging. Yes. Once. Two fours. 52. And this is what direction it's going to be. So I want, according to the numpad, 2 would be down. So minimum 1 to 5. Right, because these are technically supposed to attach to what's it calls it. So likewise, we're going to want to give this guy one up. Okay, so now if I do this correctly, these should this should attach to these, and then when they spawn, because technically my wall's right here, both of these should move up, and so it should look like the rope's hanging down over the wall. Kind of. They all like that? That one's 2 away. Anyways, this one, that one's 2 away. Ow! I'm going to assume that that is what's going on there. Oh, that may be because we didn't do our thing. But I think it's also going to be, I think we're going to still need to move it up too, though. Hmm. Need to move up 3? Yeah, I guess so. Alright, that's fine. Now let's go back up to our map. We want to connect these things here to seal up our dealie. Here we go. And just for testing purposes, this is probably going to send us to the other dungeon, and then immediately send us to the actual random generated dungeon. Not work. Can't be lazy about it. What I'm doing here is I'm wanting to preserve this code in case I need to come back to it. So I am labeling this to skip all this and then go directly to this part here. And then so once I get this all established, I can come back in here and delete out this extra code if I need to. But if I need to backtrack, then I can just, remove the labels. Uh-oh, something bad happened. No. So it should have skipped all that and just popped me right here. What's the big deal? Make sure I went to the right map here. Yeah. I don't know. One more again. Okay, better. Better, but not quite. Babes. Okay. I gotta get up here. I'll be back. I won't. I can already feel the cold air. Yep. Okay. Love you, bye. This is a camera debug thing, this little dude running down here. Not showing me my character. I think. Excuse me. I may need to switch it out here in the map. Camera controller. One that runs and drops. Here we go. Here's one. Something crazy. Do the fencer guy. Is something carrying over from the... I bet you it is. I bet it is, because the procedural generation script does some wonky stuff. Less. There we are. That's exactly what happened. All right, so it was not changing the transparency. I was getting lost somewhere between the thing. Okay, and there's an issue too. All right, so the bottom rope will sometimes get stuck in a thing. Alright, I should be able to do this kind of indefinitely here, right? Right now our loop is basically just running through these dungeons. Oh, that's the ogre there. Gotta watch out for him. Got an FPS drop. I think it might be because man, look at all that stuff getting stuck in the walls. Oh, I remember why that is. Okay. Alright, so next what we want to do is attach our... Oops. Our stairs. Everything here. Now that I know that these work, I don't need the... Make sure it pops up our floor here. Or let me make sure I get exactly... Let's not... Make sure I get exactly the code I need. Let me go up to... Actually, you know what? Take the whole thing. Not showing up on the minimap. Ooh. Oh, this is that forest map I was talking about. Okay. So, this. Alright, this should be able to fully tell this. So, if this one works this time, I should be able to kind of cheat my way to each stair, descend through the floors, get to the 7th floor, and activate the final level. No? Now, why would that do that? There we go. Hmm. What is wrong? One. A problem. Oh, I know what's going on. I'm overpopulating my dungeons with stuff. Get these down. That should give me some more room too, because I've got a lot of stuff up on the top line of the walls, against the walls here, like bookshelves and everything. Yeah. 25. Same thing here. I think this is going to be the biggest culprit. It also notice another problem. Piece of code. Oh. Before I go to the next map. Alright. On our FPS here, make sure nothing too crazy on us. Out of here. Okay, I see. It looks like it's saving some of the old events on the maps. That's okay. Easy fix, easy fix. I do not see my floor HUD changing. So I am beginning to pick up some lag here. Ah. Oh, I see. Well, yeah, that'll do it. Okay, I just saw my floor HUD go up and then it went down, which means I've got an event somewhere that's resetting my floors. Be variable 247. It must be one of my preparatory thingamabobs. Yep, there it is. We're gonna have to put that inside a additional branch, I think. What was that 247? Right, so we want to say maybe like if it's less than 1, right? So it would be a 0 if the game just started. Then we're gonna go ahead and set it to 1. Otherwise, we will do nothing. We're gonna want to bring that over to this guy. We're looking for our. Oh wait, no. We're looking over that 247. There it is. All right. All right. Now that should keep us from overwriting our floor numbers every time. Otherwise, it's an endless dungeon. Ooh, that's handy. I was wondering. We're right on it. Go, go, go. Go, Spanish Fencer, go! There we go. Alright, so then I hit a safe room. But now that's going to take me to all these crazy other dungeons. This is what I was talking about. The floor tiles change as you go deeper into the dungeon. Coming for me. Oh my gosh. Okay. Thought I was a goner. That means that we're gonna need to heal this. Gonna go to our safe rooms. Skip over that again. We're just going to preserve that code. One, safe room 2, safe room 3. Right, okay. This is it. This is the one. I can feel it. Oh! The one that was gonna mess up, I mean. Still have too many? Might. Here we go, make it a run, make it a run. Go, go, go. Two of 7, so far so good. Ow, leave me alone. Excellent. We're for 3 of 7. For 4 of 7. Go. Building up a little lag though. Gonna make it. Ah. Come on, Spanish fencer, you got it. Go. We're 5 of 7. Man. Ah. Have it. Go, go, go. Ah. Oh man, Ogre's right there. No! No! Oh. Floor 6. So close. Ow. Oh. Alright. Oh. Out of here, rat. The stairs aren't there. Go. Ah, get out of here. All right. Yay. Bane to upgrade. Right. Excellent. All right. So now we've got that closed up. So we've got our base generated dungeon. We've got the escape ropes. We've got the stairs that'll lead me all the way to the end of the game. All right. See if we can find. Magic works. Pew pew. Pew. Whack. Fix that. Oh, Ring of Hunger. Oh my gosh. Never be hungry again. Okay. We got our noise meter. We'll call our Ogre. We've got all that good stuff. Liberty there. Rep designs. Okay. We still gotta decide whether we're gonna go classes or build as you go. I kind of like the classes, but at the same time, I've got all this cool stuff for paper and all. But I've got to. So we've got our strangers. So if I'm like kind of cataloging the stuff, like the dungeon environment itself, right? So like once you're inside the dungeon, you got your treasure chests. Every once in a while, one will be a mimic. You've got your bookshelves, different containers you can open, different loot that has a chance to appear on tabletops. We've got stranger guys there. Got our pack of monsters. So our traps is what kind of needs some work, because we've got a fountain, we've got a save point, we've got shrines, study tables, we have interaction between the monsters, and we have some NPCs that will appear along the way. There's a chance for them too. So far for traps, what I've got is I've got like a bear trap. I've got like a spike trap, like sometimes that I've got ones that are always on, ones that can be turned off with a switch, and ones that are like timed, like every 3 steps or so, the spikes will come up. I've got some wall spikes too, but I'm trying to think of your traps. Like, what are some kind of traps that you could do, right? So we've got. I'm trying to populate my dungeon with like different kind of like environmental dangers here. So traps, you got spike traps. They're kind of like little bear traps. And these work on the monsters too. Don't start that. CD is gonna wig out now, and now it's gonna have to be a list. Alright. Come on. You're killing me. Spike traps, bear traps, spear traps, arrow traps? Like shoot little arrows, maybe? Projectile traps. Right. I've seen saw blade traps a lot in games now. Poison traps. Like gas, like poison gas traps, maybe. Explosive traps. Yeah. And we could make those even interact with like barrels and stuff. Right? And of course, like you maybe interact with monsters, like you can blow up a barrel, maybe, and it'll like damage everything within a certain radius. What else do we? Oh, sweet Indiana Jones bowler traps. Right? Or bowler boulder. Now, the original Rogue game, I think it was the original Rogue, you could like fall through the floor. And while technically it would increase your floors, right? Because you just dropped a floor, it could be a pain because you might not be ready to drop down to that floor. Or you might land somewhere bad. So maybe we could consider drop traps. Or like weak points in the floor. What else can we do? maybe drop traps, spike traps, spear traps, arrow traps. I don't know how you would really do a deadfall trap in a 2D environment like this. Noose trap. I'm trying to think of like traps I know of like in real life for like hunting and stuff, right? Spike trap, noose trap, deadfall, cage trap, drop trap, snare trap. You snare, maybe it you in place or something like that. But beyond traps too, so you've got like these shrines and stuff in the game, and these can be utilized as a danger as well. Now that I think about it, right? You could have like dark shrines that curse. Call them curse shrines. We could do the curse shrines, pact shrines, right? So like maybe like the player can make a pact. So you're talking about some kind of exchange here, right? Like maybe you can sacrifice an item to get something in exchange, or sacrifice some HP or hunger or something like that in exchange for a power up. Right? What else can we do? We got pact shrines, maybe curse shrines. We do have like these little like cauldrons that have like potions in them. Right? Which like if not effectively, like technically, like functionally speaking, they're very similar to shrines. And what cauldrons do is they'll usually, basically, it's like drinking a totally random potion. And so you might get buffed, you might get cursed, you might get hungry, or, you know, something might happen to you. But again, this is like, because we're trying to focus on presenting choices to the player in order to pull more behavior out of them so that they feel more like involved in the dungeon and stuff. So a lot of these could be good or bad, right? And so the player is going to have to decide whether or not they want to take a risk, or something about their character, like whether it's a class mechanic or something they've learned along the way, might be able to give them some sort of insight into the dangers that could happen, right? Like maybe if you were like a wizard, or like, you had found like an alchemy handbook or something, you can check out like know beforehand if the cauldron's going to hurt you. But if you don't have that skill, that you can't, right? We do dead shrines, right? So like maybe like a shrine, if you interact with it, it's gonna like raise the dead around you or something like that. So basically a monster shrine is really what we're talking about, right? You ever played like Diablo 2, something like that? Like a monster shrine would like summon a rare monster or something like this. You could implement that idea into traps too. Now that I'm thinking about it. Like maybe you step on a point on the floor that like opens walls. There's like monsters waiting back behind there, you know? What else can we do? We got monster shrine, cauldrons, pack shrines, curse shrines, monster trap, drop traps. We do have weak points in the wall already. It's one of the things you use tools for. Like tools can be used to disarm traps, to like break weak points in the walls, to like find little secret locations. And I didn't do it. So far they're all treasures, but that would be kind of cool, like on a, for like a challenge or something like that. If sometimes when you break through walls, like you bust into like a little burial chamber or something, and there's like a mummy in there, some skeletons or something like this. So maybe like trick treasures, which is technically right. Like the mimic is already doing that. Maybe like weak wall points, release monsters, things like this. Grab shrines, and then of course we have our stranger mechanic too. And the way the stranger mechanic works, if you're watching, you might have seen them, is they're like these hooded figures that will appear in the dungeon. You don't know who or what they are until you get close enough to them to see them. So you could just skip past them, but they tend to be they're usually an NPC of some kind. And but sometimes they're monsters. What else should we go? We've got our strangers, we've got our shrines, we've got our yeah, see, this is all the strangers right here. Do different stuff. And again, I don't want to overdo it, right? Like I don't want to bog myself down with a bunch of extra work. Now that we've closed up our actual like physical dungeon loop, like moving from beginning of the game to the end of the game, I've got to go in here and kind of gonna have to improve that procedural generation script so that the dungeons are a little prettier, or a little bit you know, cooler designed. And then it populates in all of these dangers. So another thing I was thinking of doing too is like, so I feel like it's a pretty good list of like, you know, like little dangers and stuff, right? But what about like some more positive type aspects, or maybe not even positive, but more neutral, right? Just ways to interact with the dungeon. Not just the dungeon itself, we'll call it the environment. And in the environment dungeon right now, of course, you've got switches, right? You've got containers. So the way doors work right now is it takes a turn to open a door, but sometimes you come across doors that have like barricades on them, and then sometimes you come across locked doors. So you've got just doors, barricades, and locks. And the barricade doors you can just break down, but it takes a minute, right? So like you got to hit it a couple times. So if you're trying to run from a bunch of monsters and you hit a barricaded door, that could be a problem, even though you can get through it, but it's gonna, you know, gonna take time. And so or turns, I should say. We got door container switches. Now there are bridges in the game, but what can you do with a bridge? Technically, you could go back into that weak floor point, but what else could you do? And now my mind's drifting towards what I was originally doing here with this little dungeon interaction thing here. Is like, I always thought it was cool, the idea of like, if you use magic and stuff like that, right? Like let's say you're like a frost mage. Why can't I ever use my magic to affect my environment in games in general? Like it's very rare that I play a game and I'm a frost mage, but like there's like a river and the bridge is down the way, but you know, I need to get across the river faster. Why can't I just freeze the water, you know, and like walk across it? Or like you know, something to this effect. So like I really like the idea of like magic being able to, even though you use it offensively or maybe to like buff yourself and all this kind of stuff, I feel like it should be useful when interacting with your environment as well, you know? Because I feel like a lot of video games, or the fantasy genre in general, has got kind of fixated on the idea as magic is some sort of like a combat tool. But like I remember when I was growing up playing like old Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. When you had a magic based character, like yeah, you had stuff like Fireball and like things like this, like Magic Missile and all that kind of stuff. But there was a ton of spells that were total utility, like things to light stuff up, things to levitate things to make door handles hot. Like that scene in Lord of the Rings where they're trying to buck up on Gandalf and he like turns Aragorn's sword like molten hot and like the sword actually glows red because the metal's so hot and he's like and it burns his hand and he has to drop it. Like those are the kind of wizards that I grew up around where it was like they used intelligence to kind of outwit or like redirects an enemy's strength back against them somehow, or like find something that they need to do, right? Like if you're going to be a warrior, you got to hold your sword, so it makes sense to make the sword so hot they can't hold it. It was always stuff like that. Like you had to be clever to be a wizard, or clever to be a mage or something like this. And so you know what? Let's make that its own thing, because this could be a fun little thing here, right? Like, so magic interaction with environments, right? Or door locks and things like this. Like if anyone ever played the game Nox from Westwood, that was an excellent example of, oh, now you're not going to do it? Now you're not going to give me a list? Ah! There we go. Now! In the game Nox, you only had 3 classes that you could play. One was a warrior, one was a conjurer, and one was a wizard. And the difference between the conjurer and the wizard was that the conjurer was basically a summoner. Like you conjured things, like you like had monsters that helped you and stuff, and you had like a lot of buffs and debuffs. But the wizard was one of those strangest classes and most true to that old sense of like mages and wizards and stuff that I'd ever played in a game like before or even since. And the wizards in Nox were absolute instruments of chaos in PvP. And you would be fighting with them, and it's like, it was ridiculous. Like you could take magic spells and put them into traps. You could put up to 3 of them in there. You just had to have enough mana to cast all 3 spells. And so people would come up with these crazy elaborate, just like almost trollish ways of just dispatching you in PvP, where they would find some like drop trap that fell into a death ray pit, and they'd have to kill themselves to do this, but they would drop like a magic marker in the death ray pit, and then they would craft a trap that would like teleport you to this magic marker, and so you're dead, like you can't get out of there, or they would do something where there was one where you could force someone to run, they can't stop running. And so what they would do is they would craft a trap that had Ring of Fire slow, but also run. And so what this would do was it would cause you couldn't stop, but you were running at the same exact speed at which the Ring of Fire was expanding. And since like a player's reaction is to like keep moving, unless you stop moving altogether, you're going to just continuously walk with this Ring of Fire and burn yourself up. And I always thought, like, that stuff was so funny to me. I was like, man, that's really clever. Like, that's really clever. And so they had a lot of stuff like that. So you had, like, door locks, forcing things to run, melee stuff, right? So the first thing we were talking about was maybe, like, freezing water as a bridge. Right? That could be cool. Fire magic should be able to light things. What else we got? They had like door locks. They had teleportation was always a thing, but we got to be careful how we do that because of the nature of this game, right? Being like a linear dungeon crawler. So many crazy spells. I almost kind of want to look it up. Right, you had blink. Yeah, okay. So, and then the difference between blink and teleport was that I think this was like an old D&D thing too. Is blink versus teleport? you never know where you're going to end up with Blink, because it's like a desperate short range teleport or something like that. And so you had Blink, Burn, which just basically put fire on the ground. Counterspell and Inversion were really cool. Counterspell was basically like Dispel and would just destroy all the any and all magic around you. And then Inversion was if somebody was shooting magic missiles or a fireball at you and you hit Inversion at the right time, it would literally reflect the magic back at them and hit them instead. You had Light or Heal. So there's that light and moon glow that's based off of that. That occult or psychic principle or whatever about how you glow blue. Let's see, protection from fire. Oh, protection, right? That's a big one too. Like clerics would have like protection from the undead and all this sort of thing. Feel like protection from this or that spells. You had slow, yes, that's how it's slow, tag. What else did you have? They had so many spells. Like, look at that, jeez. This was a game from like 1999 or 2000 or something. It was basically like, if you never played it, it was like Diablo 1, Diablo 2, Diablo 3, and that isometric moving around, but it was it had a campaign mode that was more like just a traditional RPG, and then it had this like just brutal PvP, like matchmaking type thing where you would just play against other players. Anchor was cool. That made if you were wearing armor, it made anything metal too heavy, and so it would that's a cool concept, right? So basically anything, it would increase the weight of all the person's gear. So if you were a warrior and you were wearing plate mail or something, this would basically just staple you to the ground, like you couldn't walk or move. Channel life, confuse, death ray, detonate scene traps. That was like if you caught somebody trying to put a trap and you cast that, it would blow the trap up in their hands. That was fun. Dispel undead, drain mana, earthquake, energy bolt, fear, fireball, force field, fumble. You make them drop their weapon on the ground, and they have to pick it back up. Haste, invisibility. Invisibility is a real big thing. Like a lot of wizards and like older stuff were very into like invisibility, and I think that goes back to that whole idea that they were supposed to be very clever and smart and kind of sneaky. Invulnerability, lightning, lock. Yeah, so that's that door lock. Mark location. So this might be an interesting concept, right? If you decide to do some sort of location marking and then be able to teleport back to the marker. So, because then we don't really have to worry about necessarily something like blink or teleport forward sort of like messing up things. And geez, who knows how a player might actually utilize that to do something neat, right? If you do like a mark location, teleport location spell. If you ever played World of Warcraft, I guess that would be kind of similar to like the Warlocks thing where they put down that gate and then they can like teleport back to it or whatever. Basically the same concept, right? You do pull push. That was interesting. Think of it like a Jedi, right? Like you actually like pull and everything around you gets sucked towards you, like barrels, characters, like treasure chests, like anything that can move in the game gets sucked towards you. And push was the opposite. You would like throw out a force that would like repel everything. Ring of Fire, reflective shield, run. Yeah, there's that run spell I was talking about. Shock was fun. What was the original thing for shock? It was like something touch or something like in the old fantasy stuff and like old D&D. The idea that a wizard, like it wasn't just like lightning, and it wasn't like chain lightning or bolt or anything like that. It was a very particular kind of spell where your hand was electrified and you had to physically walk up to and touch something, but it would just explode their face off if you touched them with it. Swap location, God, that was ridiculous. Guys who were good at using that throw themselves off an edge and hit swap location real quick. Like, but that's funny. That's an interesting concept. Let's see. We'll just put it in there just because I want to think about it and feel funny. swamp location. Swamp. Teleport to marker. So yeah, that's a teleport to marker. Teleport to target was kind of like how blink works in games nowadays, where you just sort of blink forward to where your mouse cursor is. Yeah, there's that magic trap. There's trigger trap where you could trigger it yourself. So like the detonate trap was usually used to like mess someone else over, and then the trigger trap was if you wanted to treat it as more of like a remote trap rather than a proximity trap. Wall. This is another concept I see in a lot of like magic based systems. So you put up a frost wall, or like necromancers in D2 would put up a bone wall, right? Like the ability to, like mages, old school wizards seem really adept at manipulating their environment to do stuff, right? So wall. Wall type spells. And then, yeah, then the Conjurer, by contrast, had like this. That's all the spells they had. There's all the wizard ones. Right, so they had Charm Creature, Cure Poison. Fist of Vengeance was interesting. Force Nature, Greater Heal. Infravision. Okay, so now this gives me an interesting idea. Right, so the way that infravision worked was you could see invisible things because it was basically like predator vision. You know, you could like see like heat signatures and stuff. So the basis, what you would need for that is basically invisible monsters, right? Like monsters that can hide and stuff. But now we already have the tall grass that makes them disappear. So maybe some form of infravision type concept. Oh, what was that old spell? It was like See True Form or something. Where like some magic users and like really old D&D, maybe this stuff is still around. I just haven't played it in a long time. But it was like if anything was in disguise, you could see through it as long as it was a magical disguise. Like if something was more than it appeared to be. Meteor, Pixie Swarm. And now we do have some sort of summoning or pet system that already exists. Like things that follow you around. Poison, stun, toxic. Okay. So these are some ideas for magic with environments. What do you think? What other kind of cool thingamabobbers? Technically, you think of like Zelda bombs, right? Like how you would bomb open a cave door. Is a good example of like magic interacting with an environment. And we have our tools, and we have the possibility of exploding barrels and the like. I actually do have bombs in the game already because I thought I was going to go that way. Maybe like but maybe it should be more than just bombs, right? Like bombs, fireballs, anything explosive should actually interact with things that can be hit or broken. Then hang on one second, I gotta grab a coffee. Be right back. Ah. We're talking about magic interaction with the environment. So bombs, fireballs, explosions, interacting with the struggles. We got, what else can we do here? We got, right. Maybe if I break down like elements and stuff, right? So you got like fire, ice, lightning, water, water. Water. First thing comes to mind is if you're like a cleric or something like that, right? Blessing water, holy water, maybe. Right? And so maybe that would do something like, could it be as simple as like if I come across a puddle on the ground and bless it, and an undead's chasing me, and it steps in the puddle, you know? Like, is that cheap? I don't know. Maybe you can do some stuff like that. You've got, but it doesn't just, if you're talking about cleric blessings, right? It doesn't just have to be water. Maybe you can bless like certain things. So you can bless things, sort of thing. So I do have kind of an alignment system going on, right? Like a good evil thing. But it works sort of weird because I didn't want to go overboard and add a bunch of extra stuff in. If you're a cleric, you start with the trait blessed, and it lets you use like cleric-based magic and do cleric things. Now you don't have to be a cleric. Like you can choose blessed as like a ranger or something like that, you know. But if you do, the way it works in game right now is some of the shrines are like bad, or they're like to a dark god or something like this. And you can, when you interact with the strangers, like, you know, like the guy that's like, oh, I'm hungry, instead of giving him food, you could like rob him or something like that, or be like, why don't you give me what you got, you know, kind of thing. Like some of them you can rob them or like do something to like kind of mess them over. But if you do that too much, like basically if you do anything that a blessed person might not do, you know, like a cleric probably shouldn't do, you'll lose the blessed trait. And so there is a chance that if you play as a cleric and you start doing nefarious stuff in the dungeon, that you'll actually lose your blessing, and then you're like a cleric without magic, you know? And so I thought about sort of pushing that a little farther into maybe like if you do too much, maybe you can kind of push it over into sort of like a warlock type thing, or like a you know, darker type magic thing. And if you do that, then maybe you could curse stuff, right? But I don't know how effective that would be, because a lot of the monsters in the dungeon are like undead. I feel like maybe you'd have to go, and then later on you can trigger a thing that there'd be like a lot of demon type monsters. So maybe like something more like a necromancer or something like that would be more useful in a game environment like this, because then maybe you could like control the undead somehow. Maybe like what is this thing? Maybe you could, so what are some other things we can play with too? We have our monster factions, right? Like we've got like orcs and ratkin and undead and all this kind of stuff. Maybe you could like do something to pit one faction against the other, or make one faction more aggressive or less aggressive, or something like this, right? I like that concept, but I'm not sure what to do with it yet. So we'll say like faction manipulation. Because I feel like you might be getting into like mediator territory if you ever played like Final Fantasy Tactics or something like that. Like a type of character class that talks to things, like a linguist or a mediator or something like this, right? That kind of talks his way out of situations, or like manipulates people socially to get them to do stuff. You know, maybe you can kind of like have like a high diplomacy sort of thing, or you know, something like this, and then maybe like Ratkin like you because you give him cheese all the time. We got game, door locks, teleport, faction manipulation. What else can we do? Like a like maybe you could find a flute that you like play it, it makes like Ratkin run away from you or something, you know? I feel like it's a good starting list here. We'll start with all that. I'll get the idea as I go there. It is storming outside. Whew. Alright. We got our monsters, we got all things. There's a cauldron thing. Let me grab one of these spike traps. Got one on another map here. I think it's one of these really. Yeah, here's one. Make sure these still work. Jump in our little crypt room, our little test chamber here. And another kind of rule of thumb of like the older rogue games is like I already had the monsters interact with each other, and a lot of the traps interact with the monsters. Yeah, see, so like every 3 steps, roughly, the trap goes off. So I'd want to like wait and then maybe go. Oh, I'm talking to this guy. Its power comes at a price, a curse of hunger, for you will never be satiated. Take the blade. Alright. Alright, this has got to be good, right? Like, because I don't know why I tend to feel like it's like, no, it needs more, otherwise it's not in depth enough. But like, I feel like once we actually do all this stuff, right? Like, once I add like some extra traps in here, I feel like it's gonna be pretty chunky. Like maybe even chunkier than I meant for it to be. We're gonna have to start with something here. Let's play around with that door lock idea. Let's make ourselves like a little template here. So we got doors, you got open doors, and then you've got barricaded doors, locked doors. And actually, I don't need an open door one because it's just over the tile. So right now that's set to door smash. That. So the way I got my doors here, very simple. Check on. You just bump into them, you punch them, break them open. All doors aren't like that though, are they? Oh, this is a barricaded door. Okay. Yeah, barrel break. So I wonder too, like if you've ever worked construction, you never feel safe in a house again because you're aware of how modern buildings are built, and that if somebody really wanted to get to you, they could literally come through the walls of your house with nothing more than maybe a sledgehammer and some determination. Wooden doors are not going to stop you getting through them if you have anything more than your bare hands and you really want to get through the door. So I feel like, should you be able to break down locked doors if you're strong enough, maybe? That's another whole, like, all this stuff as we come up with it, it's all going to be working in tandem together, right? So we might even find some emergent gameplay between how these things kind of, like, work out in the dungeon. And so we haven't even gotten to stat points yet, or like stat distribution, or like different things like this. Or it wouldn't be distribution, it would be like just stats, I guess. Why do you hate me? There we go. So, and by stats, of course, I mean like strength, intelligence, agility, maybe dexterity, like all these sort of things, right? Right now. And I feel like these should interact with the environment as well, or at least give you an opportunity to interact with the environment. So, strength, of course, right? First one. Maybe we say, maybe you'll have to lift heavy things. Maybe you could, like, because one of the ways that I do semi-randomization is sometimes hallways will be blocked by, like, rubble when they weren't before. So maybe if you're strong enough, you can, like, clear the rubble, right? Definitely strength would be related to breaking through a door. And we can kind of, like, make that work a little bit more past that, right? Where, like, when you come across barricaded doors, maybe you break through them faster if your strength is high enough, and you break through them slower if your strength is too low. Of course, that wouldn't work on, like, a metal door, right? But the wooden ones, that's a whole different story. Like, breaking through doors, lifting, punching stuff, you know? You have to hit anything. Strength, intelligence. Go ahead and write the ones we got here. So I know I've got strength in there. I know I've got intelligence. I know I've got agility. And I've got something else too. Is it like endurance? I think it's like endurance or something like that. I can immediately think of some good uses for endurance, right? Ability to resist poisons. Right? Maybe poison doesn't takes a little longer to take hold if you've got really good endurance. Maybe would endurance relate to, like, your food consumption, I wonder? Like, or maybe your ability to endure hunger? Perhaps. And then agility, of course, would be like maybe like dodging or evasion. Maybe sometimes. So right now, the way that traps work, if you're caught in a trap, so like if you see a bear trap, you can go up to it and, like, without stepping on it, you can try to disarm it with your tools. But if you do accidentally step on a bear trap, you get a chance to try to disarm it with your tools first. And so maybe we could add in a thing where if your agility's high enough, you can kind of dodge a trap if you happen to accidentally step on it, or like walk into a spear trap or something like that. And we could even take that a bit further and say, maybe it affects your projectile damage on you, right? Like maybe like dodge projectiles, of course. Intelligent. So intelligence is kind of a tricky one, because how would you use that? I almost feel like the player themselves would kind of affect, like, your character's intelligence, right? If you're thinking about it. How would you do that? Well, yeah, okay. So there's like easy ways to do it too, right? Like in the sense, like maybe if your intelligence is high enough, you just know things. So maybe like lore kind of stuff, right? Like maybe you can read books and scrolls. Maybe you can translate things, right? But there is a linguist trait. So maybe it can enhance your linguist trait or something like this. And then maybe you could tap into linguist, because I have also toyed with the ideas of being able to, like, just like how blessed can drop off if you do something bad, like maybe you could actually pick up traits along the way, especially if you didn't go with classes. Then you would have to pick up traits along the way, like pick things up along the way. But you could do maybe you could learn languages even though you're not a linguist. And what the way that languages work is, if you know a faction's language, like you know Ratkin speak or something like that, there's less of a chance that or you can kind of interact with them sometimes, and then maybe you can like get them to stop like attacking you or even help you or something like this because you can communicate with them. So read books and scrolls, translate things, learn languages. And then I think those are like your main stats, right? You got like strength, intelligence, agility, endurance. A lot of them will do just these three. Because usually endurance is like your hit points, right? Maybe like increased hit points. Check that out. All right. I think this will be enough to start with. Few minutes left. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this one here because I've got to get ready to pick my girlfriend up from work. And then I don't know if I'll come back today. I'll probably pick this up again tomorrow. And now that we've got all our loop closed, we can do this. The next one, I'm going to come in here and we're going to actually make all this stuff. And then implement it into the game loop and see what we're looking like. And then I'll probably have a separate stream for when I get into the procedural generation and start upgrading that too. And then this project will come together pretty quickly because we're just finishing this. Like a lot of this stuff's already done. But so that's the plan with that. And then I feel a lot more comfortable now that I have exact direction of what we're doing. So we got a plan and we're going to put it into action in the next devlog. But I got to go run pick up my girlfriend. Thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll see you next time here. Have a great day.